So I'm honored to be here today. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you will receive the message. I've been reading up on this keynote speech concept all week. I'm not kidding. I mean, I know it sounds silly, but ever since Mrs. Warren asked me to prepare something for today's event, I've been thoroughly overthinking it. You see, as an educated woman with a couple of degrees, a teaching credential, and according to my grandmother, the haze of a PhD somewhere in the stars, I've been privy to many, many keynote speeches. I should not have to read up on the concept of the keynote speech, yet here I've been overthinking it and over-researching. I bet you want to know what I found out this week. Well, I'll tell you. I discovered that the keynote speech is to be inspiring, motivating, and deliberate in its intent. It should carry a strong and lasting message that its recipients can leave holding on to. It should create a group of people who desire to go out into the world and change it based on the transformative power of the message they heard. Or so I'm paraphrasing. I captured all of this when I overthought the concept of the keynote speech. Okay, duly noted. Operation Inspiration is in full effect. I'm a parent, a daughter, a granddaughter and a niece, a godmother and auntie, a wife. I'll start there. But I'm a teacher first. The world is my classroom. As a character in the children's book, Seed Folks described her own teacher's global perspective. This is definitely true about me. The world is indeed my classroom. I learn from the world, and the world surely learns from me. But mostly I learn from it. Sometimes it's a great teacher. Other times, I really wish it would just shut up already. The reason why we're all here today is one of those times. I really wish the world would just get itself together and shut up already. But alas, it won't be quiet, and so here we are. I was there when this year's theme, Education is the Key, Don't Lock Us Out, was created. Yep, I was there. It happened in Washington, D.C. in March of this year, in a room with a handful of adults and youth from all over the country. We'd convened at Dignity in Schools campaign's Days at the Capitol event. Our charge was to come up with 3 to 5 things we felt described the sentiment that DSC and its members wanted to convey. It seemed pretty simple, really. We broke into small groups. The adult table came up with a couple of cool campaign ideas, including the idea to just reuse the Solutions Not Suspensions campaign theme we were currently under. Yeah, we were stale. The youth, though? The youth were on fire, and every time they presented their ideas, the room gave a resounding ooh after each one. I remember them presenting the last one, the one we're operating under right now, and a young lady from Chicago dropping the mic afterwards. Boom, just like that. The babies had spoken, and it was done. Inspiring, no? I've thought about the campaign's theme, though, and I must say that the ticked-off teacher and the too-tired parent in me both feel a bit of dismay when I hear it. As much as I like to say, ooh, and drop the mic, it really creates something visceral in me that it even exists, that the words are strung together the way they are and by whom they were. It's imploring, beseeching, and straight out of the mouths of youth who want you to know how they feel. Desperate, needing, wanting, and deserving. It's the world not getting over itself. It's this country imploding at its people's expense, time and time again. As if that is its very foundation and fundamental reason for breath. I mean, surely our students cannot possibly feel locked out of education. Surely not in this land of the free, home of the brave, pledging our allegiance, in God we trusty, homeland secure, border protected, melting pot, colorless, fighting for our freedoms and yours, homeland. To believe that this could happen would be, well, un-American and kind of uninspiring. The keynote speech doesn't do that kind of talk. Well, then I don't want to bore you with numbers here. To tell you the truth, the Civil Rights Data Collection has done a pretty stand-up job of giving us those. I do want to tell you that those percentages, that those youth who implore you to not lock them out, have names and faces and families, hopes, dreams, and lives. They live lives in this colorless, freedom-filled vector that cannot seem to get over itself. I suppose that would require learning about itself, and that would be uninspiring. Well, let me help you get there. The point of the keynote speech is to deliver a point. Let's discuss students actually creating a thing that asks us not to lock them out. How did I not get locked out? I must be a lucky soul. That just has to be it. Luck. How else can you explain how I got here right now, standing in front of you all? Hard work? Bootstrapping determination? Maybe. I'm the product of two Southern-born, project-raised people who swore to themselves that education will be the key to their children's everything. My mother is fluent in sign language, has a serious green thumb, and can sew on a machine without a pattern. She has this education because her life demanded that she learn these things. She has a deaf cousin that she loves dearly and wanted to communicate with, so she taught herself sign language. Her family grew their food and made their clothes. That's it. No desires to be green, no carbon footprint concerns. That's it. Life demanded a life's education. My father was an all-star baseball and basketball player who didn't go pro because he hated school and left. He eventually got his GED and his associate's degree, but his anger at not having a father around gave him a chip on his shoulder and caused him strife. It didn't stop him from being the type of dude who threw a book at us and demanded we finish it by the week's end, followed by a written or a verbal book report. He attended every parent-teacher conference and college prep night. My mother asked her friends for letters of recommendation and did her best to ask questions about things she didn't know pertaining to getting us into higher education. And I know my grandmother did not help things, getting me all lucked out and doing her best to keep me from being locked out. After white supremacy drove her and her 6 children out of Mississippi, she cleaned white folks' houses before getting her business acumen in check and creating a life of access for all of us to benefit from. Education is my family's main weapon of choice, and I stand on the backs of people who've taught me how to sharpen my sword. That's gotta be inspiring, y'all. It seems, though, that fearing an uprising of educated Black, Latino, and Native folks has always been the concern du jour. Lest we forget that this is a country stolen from folks already living pretty well here. It is a country economically maintained and built by kidnapped and enslaved brethren of mine. And getting educated by any means necessary is what people of color in America do and have had to do since its inception. Educating yourself as a person of color meant no longer believing the propaganda created about who you are and how white folks should feel about, view, and treat you. Educating yourself meant the guarantee that you would figure out that you are more than 3/5 of a man. The Constitution did not include or consider you. You were an original inhabitant of this land and had rights to it, and that your life had value. It meant more than being a slave, a servant, a sexual object of desire and curiosity, a threat, a savage, a medical guinea pig, and overall disposable. So people of color have been getting educated any way we can. Sometimes openly and without apology, but most times in secret. At times we've decided what we want to learn and have designed our own curriculum, but most times white folks have decided what we should learn and have designed it for us. We built our own schoolhouses, maintained our own classrooms, and used the ultimate education that life offers to guide our practice and deem what is important and necessary. We've created it and still had it stolen, burned down, burnt up, thrown away, invalidated, unjustified, ruled upon, disregarded, and replaced. Always replaced. Pretty inspiring, no? So how can the desire for education be such a bad thing? How could many nations of people, some with a strong understanding of who they are and the place they have here in this country, others forced to seek the knowledge for themselves and rebuild their own greatness, how could many nations of people strive to want to gain access to the fruit and be denied it, locked out consistently? The key is there. Why won't white folks share? Well, in order to share, we have to be seen as cultural, capable, competent human beings. We have to be seen as something that isn't originally steeped in whiteness. Whiteness, you know, the social construct that says that anything white just isn't right. There's an entire culture built around that here in this country. And what doesn't fit into categories of whiteness is immediately seen as other and less than. Period. There is no debate about it. But not only is it not right, it can be viewed as a threat to the grand scheme of locking us out. So people of color are penalized time and time again for bringing their cultural selves to the table. If a person of color desires to be locked out, All they have to do is do a bit of the following. Believe in and be vocal about the belief in a religion that isn't steeped in Christianity. Speak a language other than English, or speak a version of English that was created because white supremacy punished the use of the indigenous language in all forms. Have a learning style that does not do well in anything steeped in quiet, being stationary, or fostering individualism or independence from a group. Attempt to do things according to heart and relationship building, rather than following a timeline and meeting a deadline. Refusing to follow orders because the value of cultivating meaning and validation for what is being asked has been ignored, etc., etc., etc. But this is the short list to being locked out because of the denial of culture, the blatant refusal to acknowledge people of color as cultural human beings. The social construct of race, that hasn't helped either, but you know, I'm here to inspire you, so I'll leave that where it is. That campaign theme keeps playing over and over in my head right now. The tone of it disheartens me. I know where it came from and I want to honor it badly. It is a demand. It is, that is certain. It is a statement that is simple and knows what it is and what it desires. But it also denies us the ability to remember who we are as cultural human beings. It forgets that the earth has been our teacher, the drum has been our morning meeting rhythm, food has been our community builder, and the stars have been our tour guide and life change seeking muse. It forgets that we got y'all here. We helped to forge the relationships needed to help you discover this land. And we taught you our ways so that you wouldn't eat the wrong plant or encounter the wrong animal or overstep your boundaries in territory that was not as friendly and open-minded and kind and trusting as we were. Or is it that you forgot and we remember? How do we get to a place where people are listening? How do we get to a place where we are affirmed and validated as cultural beings who offered something to the world long before you discovered us, kidnapped us, raped us, made us sick and killed us, strung us up, rewired us, deprogrammed us, isolated us, stripped us, made an example of us, and then decided that we needed you on your terms? How do we get to the place where we seek our own ways to claim our keys that were taken? Is this what our youth mean truly? This must be inspiring you by now. And I wonder about this push-out discussion. Suspensions, expulsions, informal exclusions, anything that prevents youth from completing their education. That means they don't return to it once it's been denied. I keep hearing about students in hallways or in the office for extended periods of time, isolated or ignored in classrooms. The vocal ones get sent out. The quiet, self-contained ones get an all-expense-paid trip to solitude by the window or on the couch. Our youth are suffering on all levels, and who's hearing them? But how can we? Black pain is not palpable. Native pain is not palpable. Latino pain, not palpable. How can it be? This is a nation built on pushing us out by any means necessary and creating a display of great showmanship about it. Jesse Washington understood that his pain was not palpable after he was accused of raping and murdering a white woman and convicted in Waco, Texas. The date was May 15th, 1916. He was pulled from the courthouse shortly after sentencing, and amidst cries from the crowd of over 10,000 people that demanded his immediate death, he was dragged outside and hung. Of course, this young man tried to get away, and the crowd lit him on fire at the legs. To squash his attempts to climb up the chain that held his neck fast, his genitals, hands, and feet were severed. His suffering was increased as a result, and to further drive the point, the lynch mob repeatedly raised and lowered his body over the fire. With a hungry crowd who thirsted for justice screaming, his screams, I am sure, were audible over those for miles. His pain wasn't as palpable as their view of him as a savage threat to white women and their livelihoods as they knew it. So Jesse's body burned, his screams continued, and the crowd justified their actions. His body burned for 2 hours, and upon extinguishing the flames, onlookers began retrieving souvenirs for themselves, including bits of chain, charred clothing, and even his castrated genitals. His charred remains were let down, tied to a horse, and dragged through Waco until the constable gained access to the body and finally buried it. I should also mention that there are multitudes of photographs of the lynching online. How could this be, we wonder to ourselves? The answer is very simple. His pain was put on display and sold, literally sold, as postcards in Waco stores, as an example of the ultimate justice and the otherness of Jesse Washington. Inspiring, eh? I suppose you're wondering what this has to do with push-out and lack of access to education. Well, like Jesse Washington and so many men and women before and after him, the publicized, documented, and photographed brutalization of people of color in this country has created a filter for educators in our institutions in general. If Jesse Washington's pain is invalid and impalpable, well, so is Kamarion's, as he sits and waits for his grandmother to pick him up because you didn't like his challenging tone this morning or the way he eyed you from his seat. If Jesse Washington's pain is invalid and impalpable, well, so is Natasha's, as she beats on the table and makes clever quips at you while you're trying to teach her about the feudalism in Western Europe. If Jesse Washington's pain is invalid and impalpable, well, so is JT's, as he sits in back of class pretending to read, but has his headphones secretly on, completely disengaged with you and all you stand for, because he's hungry and he's tired and was alone all night while his mother worked her third job on the land her Kalapuan ancestors once cultivated before the decimation and termination 2 centuries back. If Jesse Washington's pain is invalid and impalpable, well, so is Miss Ramirez's, who wants desperately to engage emotionally and culturally with Felipe, but she was in school in California when a law was passed that didn't allow teachers to speak Spanish to their students in classrooms. She doesn't know what it looks like to connect with language in the classroom, because no one ever did it for her. And she cries to administrators in staff meetings and gets no reassurance. If Jesse Washington's pain is invalid and impalpable, well, so is Ms. Ramsey's, Ms. Tarver's, Mr. Allen's, Mr. Russell's, Ms. Whitmore's, Ms. Lopez's, Mr. Reynolds, Ms. Williams, and every parent, grandparent, guardian of color who has sat in a chair in some office or classroom, one hand on their knee to keep themselves in check, as they are repeatedly reminded that their child's tears don't matter. Their own tears don't matter, but the white child, white teacher, white parent, white staff member, or white administrator's tears and concerns do. Those tears, that pain, is valid and palpable and supremely the most important pain. If Jesse Washington's screams were disregarded for the thirst for justice, if Jesse Washington's body was desecrated and violated and broken apart and tied to the back of an animal, are you inspired enough to see the correlation between his pain and your push-out? That's how we got these t-shirts. That's why we're in this room. That is how youth of color do not gain access. They are mentally, physically, and emotionally beaten down. They are excluded. They are not affirmed for being who they are and bringing what they bring. They are pushed out, sometimes to the streets, sometimes into the juvenile justice system, sometimes into death. See Jesse Washington. See Jordan Davis. See Renisha McBride. See Trayvon Martin. See Michael Brown. See? Inspiring, ain't it? So what now? As an educator, I know what it's like out there. I also know firsthand the audacity of the ego and the arrogance attached to cultivating competence. We go to the training or the conference, we download the curriculum, we buy the CD, we adopt the protocols, and we've got it dialed. But let me remind you that checking your very strategically developed filter is a high-maintenance, privilege-obliterating task. It requires minute-by-minute, instance-by-instance attention. It requires work. It requires heart. It requires acknowledgement of how we got here, who was done wrong, and why this happened. It requires that we recognize that our state was designed as an anti-slavery, white safe haven that has consistently penalized people of color for the audacity to exist and thrive and want more. Do you have that? Do you get that? Are you inspired by that? Denying any foundational American history means that we put the cart before the horse in the attempt to create a new history, while simultaneously walking the streets paved with the blood, sweat, and extremely palpable tears of Blacks, Latinos, and Natives. The earth is our teacher, and it will teach you what you need to know when you need to know it, whether you're ready for it or not. Because the world won't get over itself, the earth is screaming. People of color hear it. Do we all hear it? Is it worth listening to? Are we inspired enough to see the value in that? But hey, the youth said education is the key. Don't lock us out, and so I'm rolling with the youth. Wherever they go, I want to be there. I commit my life to giving them what they need in order to claim their weapon and sharpen their swords. As luck would have it, I am here, standing on the shoulders of giants whose palpable tears and pain kept me from being locked out. I'm inspired to change the tone of beseeching into one that demands respect, affirmation, and regard. I'm inspired to validate and affirm myself as a cultural being. I am a Black woman, raised African American, who knows her purpose and mark on a world that just won't get over itself. I'm inspired to put human suffering and pain on the forefront in order to gauge what to do and how to do it so that suffering and pain lessens in my lifetime. I'm inspired to see that happen. I'm inspired to leave anyone behind who isn't inspired with me, though I'd much rather we do this together than not. I'm inspired to take those keys and run with them. The youth are counting on us to get over ourselves. Is this inspiring? Indeed, the answer is a resounding and unquestionable yes. Thank you.